This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Beyond simply meeting one another, most humans have made relationships a central focus of their lives. We all know that humans are fascinated by relationships. Human relationships are an inspiration for art, music, conversation, novels, movies, games, and sports, ad infinitum. Our lives are essentially about relationships, whether it be business relationships, political relationships, familial relationships, social relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, and even adversarial relationships. Thus, the purpose of the universe, meeting mysterious others, fits the human experience particularly well. Relationships are possible based on the separation that is provided by human individuality. We must be separate from what we're relating to. Therefore, some sort of separation is required for relationships to occur. The physical realm provides a setting that includes physical separation between people. The space between one person and another provides the opportunity for us to relate to each other as separate individuals. Still, it's an illusion. The deeper truth is that everything is part of a seamless whole. In spite of the seamless wholeness, each of us experience being an individual human. Finding out how it feels to meet mysterious others is simple. We do it effortlessly. This is because each of us have been fashioned into individuals and placed among other separate individuals. This makes us in our physical reality well-suited to accomplishing the goal of discovering how it feels to meet mysterious others. Passage in The Magnificent Soul by George Shishi. Valeria Teles interviews George Shishi, the author of My Open-Hearted Life, Opening to Love While Solving Life's Greatest Mysteries, and The Magnificent Soul, The Art of Living in a World Founded on Consciousness. George has been following his inner guidance throughout his entire life. He received a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering degree from MIT in 1985. After choosing to step away from the high-tech world and toward nature, George bicycled around the USA for 3 years and then moved to Maui, Hawaii. There, he delved into living close to nature while designing and building unique structures that fit the landscape and local weather conditions. His designs merged simple yet practical structures with a mild yet windy and rainy climate to create an indoor-outdoor experience. Then, while living close to nature, he delved deeper into his soul to uncover a novel 3-part triality of human consciousness that demystifies the source of intuition. He also discovered how opening and following the heart and opening to love are the keys to the happiness and genius that comes from our superconscious soul. Then, having lived the way of the heart for decades, he sat down to share what he had discovered. After 17 years of writing essays, booklets, and finally his well-documented book, The Magnificent Soul, The Art of Living in a World Founded in Consciousness, George brought forth a landmark work that may influence the way humanity views the human soul, consciousness, and the entire universe. With a background of science and a life filled with intuitive experiences, George has bridged the spiritual and scientific worlds in a new and fascinating way that turns reality right side up by placing consciousness at the foundation of the universe. To assist people who are learning to opening and following their hearts, George has been guided to found the Soul Covenant organization. While the world appears to be growing more and more divisive, violent, and extreme, this organization endeavors to establish sanctuaries that will provide safe havens for open-hearted people to follow the way of the heart with kindred souls. The Soul Covenant organization is just beginning. Hope is that this project will grow to become a global force for peace and prosperity for all. Most recently, George has written an autobiography to share the exciting adventures and challenging hurdles he encountered while learning what he presented in his first book. The new book is entitled My Open-Hearted Life, Opening to Love While Solving Life's Greatest Mysteries. The end of this new book addresses the global upheaval by revealing deeper levels of science that have remained hidden to most people. It turns out Mother Nature is wonderfully nurturing and cooperative, while civilized humanity is awfully divisive. Regardless of the problems humanity is facing, George offers hope for a glorious resolution that will benefit everyone. Meet George at soulcovenant.org. Here's the interview with George Chise.
In your own words, who is George Shishi?
Well, I'm a little person, little human being, and I'm a feeble-minded person who follows my heart. And I know that if I follow my heart, life works so beautifully, amazing. And people think I'm a genius, even though I know secretly I'm an idiot. So, but the heart is our genius. So I try and follow it all the time.
When did you start following your heart, George? Do you remember that moment in time?
I think everybody is born following their heart, and that so we receive messages from the heart through the pineal gland, which is an eyeball that receives electromagnetic radiation that comes from the heart, shoots up into the brain every time we receive a message from the heart. And that was studied at Stanford University, but people's pineal gland calcifies. A lot of that happens during puberty. Just before puberty, children, only about 2% of children have calcified pineal glands, but after puberty, by 17 years old, 40% of Americans have calcified pineal glands. And this is an eyeball. It's a little eyeball in the middle of your head. It's not near your forehead, where a lot of people think it is. It's actually in the center between your ears and straight back from your eyebrows, the center of your eyebrows. And that gland is a small eye. It has receptors that have neurons that wire it directly to the visual cortex. So sometimes we can receive messages as images, and sometimes they're feelings or thoughts. And in rare occasions, words are spoken inside your head. Yeah. And I started following that, I guess, when I was born. But when I was 4, I had an incident with the black widow spider with my brother and another friend of ours. And I was only 4 and my brother was 7 and Stephen was 8 years old. And we found this black widow spider. We put it in this box and came back the next day to look for it. And we couldn't see it. And the box had a door on it, a screen door, and then the rest of it was wooden. And that door was about half the size of one side of the box. And you couldn't see like the space that was on the other side of the box because the doorway, only allowed you to look in so far. You couldn't see around the corner, basically. And so my brother and Steve thought the spider got out this little crack. And I knew intuitively, from my heart that it was in the corner there that we couldn't see. And I said, no, it's in the corner. And they said, no, it got out this crack. And I said, well, I noticed that that doorway was big enough that you could put your head in there. So I said, why don't you put your head in and you'll see it? It said, oh, no, you got to put your head in. And I said, well, you're the ones that don't know. Don't if it's in there, you should put your head in. And they said, and they were, they outsmarted me. I was only 4. And they said, you have to put your head in and prove to us that it's in there. And I didn't know how dangerous black widow spiders were. I knew they were dangerous, but I don't think I knew that they could actually kill a 4-year-old. But I was scared about doing it, but I thought, I'm going to have the courage, and I want to prove to these guys that I know what I'm talking about. And and they were older, so I wanted to kind of, prove to them, I know. So I picked up the box and held it up over my head, and the door swung open, and I lowered it onto my head. And then I looked around and I couldn't see anything because it was dark, but my eyes adjusted. And suddenly there it was right in front of my face, and it scared the shit out of me. I mean, I was just so terrified. I threw the box and shivers, and I screamed and cried, and it was the most terrifying thing of my entire life. And it was all about my ego and what prove, not trusting this knowledge is 100% correct.
Oh my God, George.
And so I think I became afraid not to follow my heart. And I just, from then on, without knowing what I was doing, just did it. And eventually I went to MIT, and I correct these professors there that were the authors of the textbooks and the world-renowned experts. And I never studied in school. It was all so easy. I just answered intuitively.
Right.
One time I took this test, and it was an American history test, and it was a standardized test that the U.S. Department of Education wanted to find out what schools were teaching American history well and which ones weren't. So it wasn't a test for me, it was a test for the school. And the teacher, when he gave us the test, he said, don't worry about it. It's just to test the school. So, and if you get done early, you can get up and give me your test and leave. And I started looking through the booklet. And once he looked at his watch and said, okay, go. And I opened this little booklet, and it had all this reading, and I hadn't been reading. I was really poor at reading. I never did homework. I never studied. I never, did the reading.
Right.
And so I was really bad at it. And I was like, wow, I don't think I could even read all the stuff written in this booklet, let alone answer the, probably about 100 questions.
Wow.
So I thought, what do I do? What should I do?
Yeah.
And what came to me was to just read the questions and pick the best answer and don't worry about it. So I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. I'll just do that. So I quickly went through and did that. And I was done 20 minutes early, and I left the class. And then a couple weeks later, when I came back to that class, when I went in the door, the teacher said, hey, George, how did you cheat on that test? I'm like, cheat on what test? What are you talking about? He said, that standardized test that we took a couple weeks ago. He said, you were the first one to leave. You left 20 minutes early, and you got a perfect score.
Wow.
So that was a point where I later, when I learned more about what this was and tried to understand when are you following your heart and when aren't you following it, I realized that the answers are the first answer that comes. So when I was taking that test, and the first answer, as soon as I thought, oh, that looks like the best answer, I just marked it down on the sheet. I didn't worry about it because it wasn't a test that I was concerned about. It was testing the school, not me. And that was a really remarkable situation where I I thought I was guessing. When he asked me, he said, how did you do that? I said, I just guessed. And I laughed.
Yeah.
I guessed, you know. So that was really interesting. Then I found out when I was at MIT and I was trying to solve this problem in this computer science class when the authors of the textbook were the professors. There were two of them. It was co-authored, and their book was considered the Bible of computer science. I think it still might be considered that. And it was Hal Abelson and Jerry Sussman, and they had a problem. So you had to do the homework. It was 80% of the grade. So, and the homework was writing computer programs, and they were, problems to do. And then there were a couple tests. They had two tests, a midterm and a final. But those were only 20% of the grade. So I had to do the homework in that class. And so I was doing this homework problem, and I just couldn't get it. I was really close. I thought I almost had it, but there was one part of it where I didn't want the process to go into an infinite loop and spin out in one direction. And I couldn't figure out how to prevent that from happening. And I gave up, and I just decided, geez, I've spent like 2 hours on this thing. I don't need a perfect score. I'm just going to hand this in incomplete, So I handed it in, and the next day I'm sitting in class, and Hal Abelson was talking, and he was telling some kind of story that I found a little boring, and I drifted off into a daydream, and all of a sudden I knew the answer, how to do that. And it came to me in a flash, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so simple. And I thought, well, I guess that'll be on the answer sheet when I get it back, next week. Well, the answer sheet came back, and the official answer was, this is impossible. I was like, what? I know how to do it. So I went to the lab, the computer lab, and got on one of the computers and logged in and edited my program and ran it, and it worked. And I was like, oh my God, I solved the impossible problem. I didn't know it, but this class was being taken by industry professionals from around the world. These guys were considered the world-renowned gurus of computer science. And how did I know more than them? And then there was another one where there was this professor of system dynamics, and he did this really kind of advanced mathematical approach to solving a problem. And he got to the end of it, and he had the final equations, and he said, so these two springs here are not in the equation, so therefore they're irrelevant. And I raised my hand because I intuitively knew that they weren't irrelevant, but because they were the same value, they canceled each other out. They were the same stiffness. And I said, if one was stiffer than the other, they'd be in the equations. And he said, no, you don't understand. I said, no, you don't understand. He said, well, we'll talk about this in my office after class. So we went to his office, and and I drew the picture, and I said, if this spring was stiffer, then it would cause this the force to have to be stronger. And if it was the other way, it would be weaker. And he said, no, I think what you should do is redo the problem. And it was a homework problem, which I didn't do because it wasn't handed in or graded. So I hadn't even done the problem, And anyway, he said, just redo it using the other method or whatever method you want, but you'll show yourself that you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I just went out and started partying like I did pretty much every night. And he ends up the next day, he starts doing the problem with two different springs. And I'm thinking, oh boy, he's going to prove me wrong. And he gets to the end and he says, George was right. And I thought, how could I know more than this? man that's the world-renowned expert and author of the textbook, you know? But so one of the things I found, I eventually asked myself, I said to myself one day, where do all these answers come from? And I heard the words in my head, your heart. And I was like, what? My heart? That's a pump. How could that do it? You know, that's ridiculous, you know? But I had decided at 27 years old, I was involved. I should say that, when I went to MIT paid for my education there, and they wanted to pay me to get a PhD and become a professor. I had invented something. I was going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. I went to develop that. I made the prototypes. And then I realized the military would use this computer-aided design tool to design weapons. I saw that in the daydream, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do it. So and there were other problems going on with my partner stealing seed capital that I raised for the company and embezzling it. And anyway, I decided, I don't want to do this. I don't even want to help the technology move forward because we're just destroying nature. And nature is absolutely amazing. A tiny little seed drops to the ground and forms an entire plant. A tree is formed from a tiny seed. That's miraculous. There's no way we're going to figure out how to do that. Nature is brilliant. It's unbelievable. And as an engineer, I could see that. And I could also see, I had for my my bachelor's degree, I went to General Motors Institute, and it was a work study program. And I had done some work assignments in the factories as foreman and stuff. And those factories are so awful. They're so toxic and stinky and just awful. And we're destroying nature to mine all these materials. And I'm like, oh God, I don't even want to be part of this. I just want to go back to nature. Eventually I moved here to Maui, and I live in a tiny little cabin. It's 140 square feet, and 170 square feet, excuse me. And I'm building something for somebody that's 140 square feet. So mixed up on that. But anyway, and I have nature all around me, and bananas and coconuts and everything growing, and I harvest them myself and enjoy the fruits of nature, and it's beautiful. But I dropped out. I dropped out of the whole thing, and I eventually, my best friend at MIT, John Hirschtick, he developed an equivalent product. I had the prototypes of mine done in 1987. He put a product on the market in 1997, 10 years later. It's called SolidWorks. It's the top computer-aided design tool in the world. And he sold the company in less than 1 year for $320 million. So I had that 10 years earlier, something of that nature. And, but it's not about the money, and following your heart rarely leads to lots of money. It's led me away from money, but yet I've always had what I needed, and I still do. It's not about becoming famous and wealthy. It's the way of the heart is a humble path, and it's a path where that is actually prophesized. And it's interesting. And a lot of the people you bring on, I've listened to a lot of the interviews you've done with people, and a lot of it is spiritual interviews and involving shaman and involving, the spirit realm and the subtle body and all these kind of, things like that. And I always wondered, why is there so much focus on something outside of us when the God is within our heart, you know? And I found that there's two paths. There's the way of the heart, and there is the ascension path. The way of the heart is where the meek inherit the earth, and the ascension path is for those who don't follow their hearts.
Wow.
External spirit, a God in heaven, some spirit guide that they connect with, spirit realm. And this spirit realm is a real thing that really exists. You know, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth is the physical realm. The heavens is the spirit realm. And there is a spirit realm, and we go there when we die. And, you know, I've been there. I've found several different ways to go there. I've explored it to some degree, and I found that it isn't the way of the heart. And found that just simple living is on this earth is the way of the heart. And there's a prophecy that the meek who will inherit the earth once all of the divisive people have left the planet, and they will meet their twin flame and live until the end of time in their body without dying. They'll rejuvenate. It's a fairy tale like of prophecy, but I think it's true. And I think that this thing that's going on today, this world global upheaval, is leading to that inheritance. I think that the removal of the divisive people is taking place right now. And there's this weird thing about divisive people. Like, why are there divisive people? One of the greatest questions is, if there is a God, why is there so much crime and murder and evil people on the planet? You know, there's an answer to that question. And if you go back, I had an experience with this girlfriend of mine. She was teaching me this practice called Tantra. It's a kind of lovemaking practice that's spiritually oriented, but it's also, you know, you have really great physical experiences too. So anyway, we were practicing that, and I was doing some building projects, and I cut my finger halfway through on a giant saw, 12-inch compound miter saw. Anyway, this blade went halfway through and nicked my tendon. And the doctor said, you know, you cannot do any work for 2 weeks. If you use even your other hand, when you use it and lift something heavy or whatever, you'll clinch the hand that needs to rest. So you just have to stop working for 2 weeks. So the next time I saw my girlfriend, like I think it was maybe the next day, I said, yeah, I've got 2 weeks that I'm not going to be doing anything. I can't work. I can't continue doing the building stuff I'm doing. And so I guess I got a couple weeks of vacation.
Yeah.
Well, I got an idea. She was a nurse, and she took care of this wealthy lady, and the old elderly lady, along with other nurses, and she only worked 2 shifts a week, like these 16-hour shifts overnight. And she said, you know, what I'm going to do is rearrange my schedule with some of the other nurses, and I'll open up a week, and let's go hiking. But every day we'll go hiking, and we'll make love by the waterfall and the crater, all kinds of in the jungle everywhere. We'll go hiking every day, and we made love for like 2 to 3 hours a day, and using this technique where you don't release, you don't, you know, have the climax, right? And so we did that for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, we were going to release. But on the 6th day, when we were doing it. My whole being was, in a state of orgasmic bliss, vibrating, and it was extending beyond my fingertips. It was unbelievable. It's an experience with this stuff. And anyway, I'm looking into her eyes, and I have this thought. I have this thought that I would be willing to die. It would bring her more happiness. And it was like there wasn't any reason, wasn't like that could bring her more happiness by dying. But if a situation came up in which my sacrificing my life would give her more joy, I would do it.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And I found that's what love is being sacrificed for the other, And then the next day, we did the final session. And at the end, as we were getting, my body is completely going off, and I'm running this energy between us in this circle, and then my crown blows off, and water seems like it's gushing out of the top of my head and through my body, and my legs have all disappeared. Everything below my waist has disappeared. My hands start crumbling, and my whole being disappears. And all there is this water flowing like a fountain, and then it disappears. And then I'm in a void. There's nothing. And then there's this explosion. And it's all this misty white space that my point of awareness is in this misty white space. And there are these waves. There's spherical waves emanating from my point of awareness, expanding outward like balloons, expanding. And each one is a wave of orgasmic, undulating, juicy bliss, one after another. And they keep expanding and more keep erupting forever and ever for as far as I could comprehend. I had become an infinite orgasm. And I knew it had to be the most amazing sensation that could possibly be felt. I was like, whoa. And then this weird thought came to me. It was like, what? Eventually, this would become boring. Like I would get used to it and I would want to do something else. And I thought, well, that's really strange to think of that because, it still feels incredible, and it was still going on. But I thought, I guess that's true. And then another thought came, like a memory, that the one consciousness that existed before the universe, before time, had already done that. It done everything it can do as one thing. And it was out of things to do as one thing. It came up with this idea. How would it feel to meet another? How would that feel? That's something it had never done because there is no other for the one. And in that state, I was the one. There was no other. There was just me. And I was infinite. And I had remembered why the universe was created, to find out how it feels to another. And of course, love is the most wonderful expression of that kind of meeting. But the problem was, how do you change the one into many? And so the one tried different things, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but to shorten it up, I'll just say that eventually the one created the heavens and the earth and humans, and the humans were meant to be the beings that would be individuals who would experience meeting one another. There was a problem. They knew they were part of everything and everything was part of them, and they weren't separate. Now, the thing is, I met 3 anthropologists that lived with people before even the shaman existed in their tribe, in their clan group. They were, truly original people. And these anthropologists, I asked them, were those people individuals? And all three of them separately, independently said, absolutely not. We're not individuals. And this is the problem, is that the truth is everything is one. And to find out how it feels to meet another, you have to accept separation and duality. Well, a lot of spiritual people say that we need to get out of duality and we need to return to oneness consciousness. We actually were in oneness consciousness, and that was a problem. What we really needed was to find out how it feels to meet the other. So to do that, a divisive process had to be set into play. And the divisive process involved divisive people. And the divisive people started with the shaman. It's really weird because we so highly regard the shaman.
Yeah.
And medicine and the priest. And the priesthood and the medicine man are one in the shaman. And yet we see right now that the medical field is like diabolical. It's really some crazy stuff right now, and we won't get into that. But the process of creating a shaman, just imagine you've got to try a group of people, a clan, whatever it is, whatever you want to call that group. And all of a sudden you get a shaman. Now, how does a shaman become a shaman? Well, when we dream, when we sleep, we enter the astral realm. We enter the heavens when we go to sleep. And in our sleep, we can meet spirit beings. And the spirit beings can guide us to eat the mushroom, to eat the hallucinogens. And the mascara is the first one that we know of that is the basis of Christianity, and the original word shaman comes from the people in the Siberia, where the Amanita muscaria was this substance of use. There's pictures in churches of these mushrooms. This process of using the substance to enter the astral realm for longer periods of time created the shaman. And the shaman then taught about the spirit realm and how the big God is in heaven. It took people away from their hearts because the God is within as well as in heaven. There's, different parts of this one that are playing all different roles. And now the shaman starts teaching to go to align with this external God. Well, this external God tells the people they need to circumcise the men, which is a brutal process. This external God tells them to go to war. This external God tells, basically creates the madness of civilization, and the inner God, the one in your heart, is just leading you to love, and everything. I'll give you a little quote from Albert Einstein. He said, when talking about theoretical physics, he said, the state of mind which enables a man to do work of this kind is akin to that of the religious worshiper or the lover. The daily effort comes from no deliberate intention or program, straight from the heart. That's Einstein. Here's another quote from him. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift, the intuitive mind, which is in the heart. Intellect, here's another one from Einstein. The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness Call it intuition or what you will, and the solution comes to you, and you don't know how or why. That's my life. All the time, the answer comes, and I don't know how or why, but it's always right. And then my mind will often get in the way and think, oh, well, maybe it should be a little this way or that.
Different.
You know,
Yeah.
I screw it up, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway,
True.
so, this is it. And when we wonder, like, is this possible that the universe is made of consciousness? Well, here's Max Planck. Do you know Max Planck got a Nobel Prize in 1918 for developing quantum theory? He was the beginning of quantum theory, of the whole quantum thing. Planck's constant is the number that is the ratio between the wavelength of light and the amount of energy in a photon of that wavelength. And he, in 1931, he said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. Then later in 1944, Planck said, there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom into vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. So it's the mind, it's this consciousness, this one enormous consciousness that has created this whole thing to find out how it feels to meet another. And to do that, we have to be separate. And to be separate, we have to have these divisive people pushing us apart and making us feel separate. So the whole process is put into play, and it's all perfect, and there's no good people and evil people and right and wrong. Everybody's playing their role. All the roles are perfect. And when the divisive people go into the heavens, there's a really interesting property of the heavens, which I experienced when I was there, that whatever you desire, whatever you think of, will appear. And every desire you have can be satisfied in the heavens, except for one. And that one is, how does it feel to meet another? Because the other, there is no other. When you're in the heavens, everything, you create your own reality. This whole idea of you create your own reality, it comes from astral travel. There's all kinds of people that do astral travel. There's all kinds of schools. There's international schools. There's all kinds of books on it. It can be studied, and there are techniques. You don't need any substances. You can do it with techniques. And you can explore the astral realm, and it's very, very interesting. In fact, it's endlessly interesting. And it's so interesting and so endless that you can get completely absorbed in it and not even participate in life. So this is a distraction to me. And even though it's the foundation of religion, of most spirituality, I have no interest in it. I want to I've explored it, I've learned about it, and then I'm like, once I finally realize how it all fits together, I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. I just want to connect with the earth, with my friends, and experience meeting the other. It's here in the physical realm where two pieces of consciousness are embodied in two separate bodies, and we get to meet each other, the birds, and we get to meet the bees and the plants and everything. And it's all different parts of this consciousness. And we can have relationships with everything. And of course, the most wonderful relationship is love. I've noticed that you often ask a question to your about self-love and unconditional love.
Yes, yeah.
And I'd like to say something about love, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, please.
So love is very interesting. I decided to do a little research on it, and I found out that it's actually pretty new, love. I found that the people that existed before civilization, the original people, didn't have lust or love. They were in a state of oneness. They didn't see another. So what's the point of loving